sense? I don't know.
Yeah, to an extent, yeah.
Just before we continue, and thank you, Anthony, I think that's definitely a point I'd like to pick back up on shortly. I'd like to, first of all, just state that Anthony's here as one of the officers on our panel today, but his views are definitely his own. They're here to assist us in our understanding of how the different officers come to their findings and come to their conclusions within themselves, but it's not a representation of the Met's official opinion point. So just to bear that in mind as we go forward. And just with regards to sort of saying things that are on our heart, I'd like to ask at this point if Adam could lead us in an opening, midway opening prayer before we continue any further.
Sure. All right, let's bow our heads. Father, my God, we want to thank you so much for bringing us here to discuss matters of the heart, matters of your community, matters that apply to each and every single one of us. Help that as we do so, we may do it respectfully, that we may do it with clarity, that we may go away from here learning or knowing more, and also applying the manner in which you would have us live. Take us through these proceedings here, be with all of our voices, be with those of us who may not have the expertise of the ones that we are going to learn from, be with the viewers and the listeners so that they may too learn something. These things I ask for Jesus' sake. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I think just briefly going back to that point, Anthony, if you don't mind, there was a video on Instagram. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but there's a police officer and he's explaining to a young man in, I think it's Cambridgeshire, why he stopped him. And he just said, I'm going to be honest with you. I stopped you because you're black and you're male. And in this area, we don't have many black males. And we've had instances where black males have been coming up here and selling drugs. So I just stopped you to ask. In the clip that we saw, he wasn't particularly aggressive. Neither was the young man that was driving. Is there room in needing to preempt potential issues going forward in using stereotypes to be able to do that as a police officer, do you feel?
He's walking a tight line, but essentially the guidelines also, say for example, you've got a particular problem in an area. So that if you go to, I don't know, the Highbury Estate or something like that, and the Highbury Estate has a large drug problem. It's got prostitution and it's got drugs there. That's what it's known for. Those are what the statistics come back and say is going on there. So majority of your crime reports, possibly that it's around drugs and prostitution. You are somebody that works in that area or patrols that area, and potentially most of the locals and ordinary people, you'll have an understanding how they behave, who's around, because you're there in the streets and you see people from time to time. Now you're going around and you see a new face. You don't know that person, never seen them. You know what the area is known for, and you've got that description of probably the age groups, the ethnicity codes and all that sort of stuff. You can go in and start speaking to that person. Going back to what I mentioned before, you have that grounds, and then you start having that conversation to ascertain what you're dealing with and who you're dealing with. So you then go and start speaking to that person, and then you will develop more in the sense of whether this is worth you carrying out the actual search or not, if you see what I mean, depending on what you see and how that person behaves. Because with stop and search, a great deal of it is around, like I said, what's there in presence, and it's around behavioral mannerisms.
I think similarly, Ruth, within your side of things, I guess it's sort of the stage afterwards. And I guess, Auntie, you've potentially had instances where you've had to go into court yourself, maybe. I mean, I don't know, I'm assuming. But as a police officer to give witness or to potentially talk to a particular situation. Ruth, to what extent do you feel like those stereotypes filter sort of not just, or the need to use those stereotypes filter not just throughout the police, but perhaps, like you were saying before, suggesting before, across the jury, and potentially, throughout even barristers who are themselves either prosecuting or defending a case?
Can you clarify which stereotypes?
stereotypes with regards to, you know, whether it's the fact that he's a young black male, so he may or may not have been, you know, selling drugs, or what if he was accused of, or, you know, whatever stereotypes. I mean, I guess at the moment we're talking about the black community, so any stereotypes that you may know within the black community, but yeah, I guess more widely also.
I think it really does depend on the crime. It would depend on the offence that they're accused of. So although we know that racism and stereotypes and prejudice do exist, that's not to say that every single young black man that goes into a particular courtroom accused of a particular crime, say drugs, for example, will always be found guilty. In the bar, we do talk of obviously certain areas. You might be more likely to get an acquittal, for example, because the jury is more mixed, or because that area is more familiar with certain crimes. So if, for the example, maybe Cambridge or somewhere like that, if there was a particularly maybe a more violent crime, maybe a crime involving multiple people, it may be something that's more uncommon for them. And so maybe certain stereotypes or prejudices may come into it. But I think it's more on a case-by-case basis.
Right. Interesting. Just to recap something that John had highlighted in his account in regards to his interaction with police or being stopped and searched, and Anthony saying it. I think one thing that we always need to bear in mind is our attitude, I guess, in the initial interaction. Probably attitude does need to, we just need to stay calm, as I've heard it being said before many times. But I guess, Anthony, just to kind of reiterate a certain point you were saying, I guess your attitude depends on where this could go, or the response that you could get from the police officer.
It is partially, and it's the same thing. Imagine or something. You are somebody who's stocking the shelves or something for an item, because it wasn't there, and they fobbed you off and said, well, I don't have the time for that right now because I'm doing this. Or do you understand?
Yeah.
You're going to feel offended, aren't you? You're going to feel a way about it. And then whatever you respond, they might get a bit offended from that as well. If you then react to the way they've answered you in a negative manner, they then take it in a bad way as well. So the point I'm trying to make is, people forget that you are essentially dealing with members of your very community. It is just that there is an added layer because they've been put into an office to uphold the law. Essentially, it's like you are going to have good and bad. There are people that obviously would have joined this role or may have joined the role because they themselves are people who want to enforce authority onto other people, and they lack that the empathy and that humanitarian kind of view in terms of the individual when they're dealing with them. You will essentially come across that because it's a large organization, but it's not everyone, and majority of the people in the organization, they're not like that. They're actually people who are professionals who want to do their job, if you see what I mean. Right,
of course, definitely. Angela, did you have a story in regards to someone someone you definitely know having that interactions with the police?
Personally, not myself, but my son.
Right.
Was stopped and searched on 3 different occasions. And on those 3 occasions, he was told that he fits the description, tall and black. And the first one, I think he really panicked. So he said, luckily, he was with a friend, a white friend. I thought to myself, well, if you're with someone and you are, being questioned by the police for drugs, and you're with someone, I was automatically think that person would be an accomplice. But his friend was not searched, and not asked any question, nothing. So I thought, he said the only thing that, his friend helped him to calm down and said to him, just give the police your ID. And, he looked at it and...
And was this in London?
No, Colchester.
Colchester. Okay.
Yeah.
What age was he?
Sorry?
What age was he at this point?
He's 20.
Okay. Right. So, situations like that would definitely have people would I guess spark that thought in people to say that, oh, that was a clear instance of racial profiling.
Yeah.
Would you agree, Anthony?
It possibly is. It possibly is. And if he felt that, and if that's what he felt about that situation, that's where your rights then come into play, where you make sure you get good information about why you're being stopped. If you're going to be searched, what powers of law is it that you're being searched under? The officer who's stopped you has to clearly identify themselves. They could technically show you their warrant card as well to verify their names and what station they're at. And they have to follow all the policies correctly. They're meant to tell you things like you're detained for the purpose of a search, and there's little stuff like that. So it's good at that point for you to know your rights and make sure that the officer is complying with what he should be doing. At the end of the search, they're meant to complete a slip and they're meant to tell you where it will be stored, give you a copy of it. If they don't give you a copy, normally I think they store it at the home station for 12 months or so you're entitled to apply from the home station anyway. But in any case, these things are stored and filed for 6 years essentially anyway.
Right.
It's things like that you need to know your rights. Then and if you need to put a complaint in after the fact that you've taken this person's like you can take like the shoulder number or and you when you take these things, then you can put it in writing and make an application to say, look, I don't think I was dealt with appropriately here. This was completely wrong and it wasn't fair. One person was searched, the other wasn't searched. And you know what I mean? Highlight what the issues are. Yeah, make it known.
Yeah, just to quickly add, when he pointed out those things like you just said, Anthony, they quickly said to him, well, where do you want us to do this here, or we'll take you down to the police station? So,
but when they say take you down there, what taking him down there under what pretext? So they could do it, but it doesn't mean that it's lawful. So you could, if you a search can be complied with on the street where you're just it depends on what you're searching for. So if they have that suspicion and they're going to take him for a strip search, then that's when you'd take someone back to the station, if you see what I mean. So and even if they did take him there and they did that, it doesn't mean that because every time a search is done, you or anything essentially that an officer does in terms of dealing with the citizen, you must comply with what's called human rights.
Right.
Yeah. So it's got to be reasonable. It's got to be proportionate. Your actions have got to be reasonable. They've got to be proportionate, and you have to take consideration of that person's human rights. You can't breach their human rights. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So it's little things like that say, take me down there then. Let him do what he's doing. But then after, what you're going to do about how you were dealt with. You see what I mean? So there's no point fussing and arguing. Let him make an idiot of himself, if that's the case. Because you know what you're going to be doing after.
Okay. Ruth, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I did. I agree with Anthony's points in terms of knowing your rights. Your son knowing his rights. His friend gave him some information at the time, said to show them the ID and things. However, in terms of knowing your rights, if it's that at that stage, he doesn't have to give his name and address. It may help because, as Anthony said, then it may be that then he's deemed as more suspicious. Why wouldn't you give me your name and address if you have nothing to hide? There's a card that I have here. There's a website called Why Stop. It's a very simple breakdown stop and search card. that outlines the things to do, such as, like Anthony's explained, you can ask why, you can ask if you are being detained or arrested. Your son did raise some points in terms of questioning why the friend wasn't being, and what I would say, again, coming from sort of the criminal barrister perspective, is if that case had have reached me at a certain stage and it was 2 males, the description and the reason why they stopped him was 1 male. It wasn't 2 males. It wasn't 1 black and 1 white male. It was 1. And so from a joint enterprise perspective, which is a principle in law that is very controversial, because it shouldn't be that because one person is up to bad, all their friends with them are up to bad.
Right.
And so you can see it from both sides, that you stop the black man, but that particular description was only about a black man. Had the description been about a black and a white man or about 2 males, then you would expect for both of them to be stopped. But I 100% agree. And that's not to say that there aren't times when they do pick out the person of color and not their counterparts. But in that particular description, I also have an issue with that description. I think that they are insufficient. It's not good enough to say a tall black man, because if I was to go out and walk on the road now, how many tall black men would I pass? And I think that's something, it's not necessarily your son or whoever stops doty to do that, but again, it's something to kind of probe and challenge. What else was said? What was this tall black man wearing? Does it match what I'm wearing? Me, if I was stopped, I wouldn't just expect you to say a black female. I'd be thinking, well, what was the description? Are they wearing a pink jumper like me? Are they wearing a head wrap like me? It's not really our duty.
Some more of those details, you think?
Yes. Sorry?
Could you ask for more of the details in terms of the description?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you're right, but again, sometimes it's a question of, should you have to do that as the person being apprehended? But it is your right, and I think for your own peace of mind, maybe it might be good to ask that, because if they turned around and said, yeah, the black female is wearing a pink jumper, I think, wow, who's this, and the head wrap, who's accusing me, who's describing me? Whereas if they then maybe, and again, I think there's a duty on the officers as well to get that information. So if you've got this information called through, asking whoever's providing the information, well, what more? What trainers is he wearing, or is he with somebody, or is he whatever? So you have more information, and it means that also their stops are more targeted and more specific towards the people. However, things do happen and things aren't always great. By the time it reaches court, a description like that wouldn't stand, because the police have regulations known as the PACE, Police and Criminal Evidence Act. So if they're giving a thorough description of someone, it has to go deeper than that level. It needs to go much deeper in terms of features, maybe what they were wearing, were they found at or near the scene. And so, yeah, in terms of that, description wasn't insufficient. The description was insufficient, should I say. Your son, however, he followed through at that time, I agree with. And also, if things have gone wrong, or if you still feel aggrieved, as Anthony said, make sure you get that slip and also get the information. The officer should be able to also tell you their name, their number, and what station they're attached to. If you don't get the physical slip at the time, I would advise always push for it at the time, but then you can also go and get it from that station, like mentioned. With John's point about his interactions, it is about kind of being confident in your rights as well. I think sometimes we get nervous about people in a position of authority to us, and sometimes it may question you, but sometimes we can get it wrong as well, people in positions of authority. And so in terms of saying, we can just take you down to the station, like Anthony said, well, under what grounds? You could fall into the trap of thinking, oh no, they've got every right to take me to the station because they're the officer, they know everything, and it's not always correct. So knowing your rights and reading upon them and being confident, you would be a bit more confident to say, no, I know you don't have the authority. Right. You cannot take me down to the station until you give me a proper explanation. And so it's being more informed on both sides and providing more information and having a real clear dialogue as to why you're being stopped, what they're looking for, what they are hoping to achieve. And also what your rights are. Can you leave? How long do you have to stay there? Will you be taken to the station, or will you be leaving in a few minutes? And will you be leaving with a slip?
And Ruth, can I just ask before we do jump on, can you please repeat the name of the website that you mentioned before? I think it was the Y.
Yeah. So it's www.y-stop.org. I don't know if you can see that.
I think what we'll try and do is we'll try and add that in the underneath the Facebook video so that everyone can also log on to that. I think that was amazing, and that was really good information, great practical advice, I think, for people to take forward.
I've got a question, sorry, before we move on. I just want to know, I've got a son who's 14. Are they allowed, is this right to stop an underage child, to stop and search or whatever the case may be? Is that something that's
And that question is going to Anthony or Ruth? Huh?
Either one. I just need to know in regard to that.
I can't even remember the ages off the top of my head. I know if you've got somebody under 15 or 16, you take them into custody, you've got to let their parents know about it. Don't quote me on that one. I still have to look up that one because, like I said, I haven't been on the street for a bit. So I'll get back to you on that one just to make sure I don't give you a fuzzy answer.
No worries.
He's 14, yeah, and he's been stopped and searched.
Oh no, he hasn't. I just need to know in a situation like that, if I ever do face it, is this allowed? Is this acceptable? Because seeing as he's underage for one, I'm assuming that you're not allowed to question an underage child without an adult, a president.
Oh, you can. We've even got the power to remove him. We've even got the power to remove an underage child off the street and take him to a police station or take him to your home. If we think that he shouldn't be out in the street and possibly he's at risk or anything of that sort, you know what I mean? Yeah, we've got the power to do that. So that's besides the point. They'll be able to speak to him and find out why he's there and what's going on. Let's not be. In my years, yeah, I've actually come across people who have been dealing drugs literally from they're like 13. They're like runners for the dealers. They're in blocks. Probably, sometimes they're not even going to school. You search them and they've probably got 500, 600, 700 pounds on them. So things are happening that you, the wider public, may not know, but there are people who, because they might be from a home where the dad's not present or the mom's on drugs, or you don't know what their backgrounds are. These are people who are, they're vulnerable, aren't they? And then the older guys get to them, enchant them with, oh, you can make all this money. This is what you can have. These nice trainers. Look at me. And they become their little role models. And before you know it, they're drawn into crime and criminality of such. So, yeah.
Sorry, Alita, did you want to ask another question, Alita?
No, it was in the terms of interrogation. Like, is that because that's what yes. All right, go on, Ruth.
Yeah, that's different. That is different. So if, for example, so like Anthony said, there's stop and search and there's stop and account, and so we can't avoid the reality that clients are getting younger and younger. For me as well, and the criminal age of criminal responsibility is actually 10 in the UK. And so 10-year-olds can be held to account for crimes that they commit because they are deemed to have the mental capacity to know right from wrong. And so if you're moving on to in terms of interrogation now, so if they're going to try and strip search your child or bring them down to the police station and interview them, then of course they need to have somebody, what's known as appropriate adult. So that's when as their parent or a guardian or someone from the local authority or someone provided will be there for them to help them, or be there to make sure that they understand the questioning and that the questioning is being put to them correctly. But in terms of kind of stopping them on the street and asking them to account, and if you're not around as a parent, they're not going to wait.
Right. Just to throw this question to Adam, and we can start having this as a general discussion. I think one of the general shared feelings across the Black community in particular is a lot of people, and especially a lot of young Black men, feel targeted by the police in certain situations. What do you think that the police has a responsibility, or should have, should do something in regards to the relationship between the Black community and the police? Should police actually step in and do something in regards to that relationship, you think, Adam?
All right. that requires a complex answer, if I'm honest, because I honestly think the police, with all due respect to my brother, with all due respect to all my family that serve as police officers and friends that I have that serve as police officers around the world, the police historically are the best backed organization that could do whatever they feel like. And the Black community, unfortunately, historically, has been the biggest receptors of police forces being able to do whatever they feel like. Now, I speak from personal experience in multiple countries where I've been stopped, I've been mannerly, I've been calm. Anybody that know me personally know that I got a short fuse. So if I tell you I've been calm, I tell you I've been calm, I've been articulate, and then assumptions are made. Oh, you think you're smart? And then you will go along the line of, like what Anthony mentioned and Ruth mentioned of, like, if you quote your rights, they then threaten you by telling you, well, we can take you down to the station. I've also been, unfortunately, a receptor of that type of treatment, even though I've stated my rights. So my problem, the answer to your question is, yes, I feel that the police should better their behavior or attitude, and the government, for as a matter of fact, the legislators need to crack down a lot more on police who are actually given the mandate to protect and serve, rather than to harass and whatsoever have you, and exercise force unnecessarily, especially to individuals who they stereotype, even when the individual then responds articulately and calmly and state their rights. They still will carry you to the station just because, and they will tell you, listen, I take you to the station, you can't do nothing about it. And majority of the time, we actually can't do anything about it anyway. You know what I mean? So that's where my problem is. I am all for everything we've been talking about so far. I am fully on board. I am in full agreement of how we are to react, and you have to know your rights and what's not. What I would like addressed is the injustice that is passed down, government and legislation, down to the police force, who then inflict it on using the stereotypes that they continue to use even in 2020.
Okay, good. Thank you, Adam. We'd just like to take this time to welcome Sir Patrick. He's a police officer joining us in the discussion. Hello, sir. You okay?
I am. Sorry for coming in late,
right.
but it seems to be
just heating up. Just
well in the groove. Hi, everybody.
You know when the pot just bubbling, you know.
Big hail to a man called Patrick.
We were just talking about the relationship between the Black community and the police force, and how that can be further improved. In your experience as a police officer, do you see any ways that the police force can improve it, or do you see a struggle in any way of improving that relationship that seems to, well, I would say it's already kind of breaking. It's a struggling relationship that's been ongoing for years. Do you see any kind of way of bettering it? Yeah.
So to attach to your question as well, actually, I think a good question is also our officers being trained to deal with the different community groups. Obviously, they have different backgrounds, different ethnicity and stuff like that. So our also police being trained to deal with that. So maybe that can attach that to your question as well.
Sure. Brilliant. Thank you.
But is that's for me, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. It's, if I go back to my first memories, well, my living, shall I say, 1981 with the Brixton riots, yeah? And that was as a result of racial profiling,
Right.
where Brixton or parts of South London, the young men and individuals in the community did disrupt, or should not disrupt, did erupt because they were fed up of being, because of the SUS law. And then if you're looking at 1985, then it went up to, was it 85, went up to Broadwater Farm. But then when you then come into then the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, and then now we're coming into, you've got them, now you're coming into 2020, the same questions are still being asked. And do I need to say, I would say in my years of being an officer, yes, things have changed. Yes, things, what I have seen. However, you're still always going to get that element, aren't you? So no matter how much training you have, it's down to each individual. And I can speak for, I'm not speaking for all, and I can't speak for all. I don't think that would be right for me to do so. But strides have been made, and this is not me trying to protect anybody in any way, but at the same time, there's always an element that needs to be dealt with.
Right.
Okay. And we just hope in time that, that will, I think, will, as it has happened through legislation, that, you just can't stop somebody without a reason. Okay. You can't stop somebody without, as they say, racial profiling them. But as we know, unfortunately, most of the time, that is the case because of what goes on in our local streets. And if you're looking at the descriptions of those whom at times commit crime, then there are reasons for to stop and search. However, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to deal with them disrespectfully. And there is, for me, and you have to have a higher code of conduct when you're obviously you're dealing with any section of the community, and you can't profile or stereotype them purely because of by the way they look. But I would say, in short, it is getting better. It is getting better. And I think the reason why I say it's getting better, people may turn around and say it's more covert purely because of the political correctness over the past few years. There's certain things that certain individuals can't do or say anymore. Yeah, but that doesn't mean to say it doesn't go on. All right. But also, if you're thinking about, if you're looking at the disproportionate levels, again, within the prison community, with the people being, Black community being stopped, you then think, well, what's going on there? Yeah. If you're looking at the disproportionate numbers of colleagues being disciplined, again, you'll be looking at the higher, because of, you would have to question, okay, is it because they are non-white, they are being disciplined and prosecuted? Yeah. So all those questions have to be asked, and it doesn't take a scientist to understand, an element of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
and those are questions to be, those are questions that I will be asking. Yeah?
Right.
Before we go on, I just wanted to reiterate and thank Patrick again for coming. Just to reiterate, Patrick, much like Anthony, is here in his own capacity and isn't here sort of as a representative with regards to his statements he's making of the Metropolitan Police. I would also like to ask a question. I think that sort of ties quite neatly into what you were sort of just discussing with regards to relations between what's developed between the police and the Black community. So the Metropolitan Police's Assistant Commissioner, I think a couple of days ago, if not yesterday.
Sorry?
The Metropolitan Police's Assistant Commissioner, I think it was yesterday, 10th of June, just put out a statement. And within that, he said, I quote, "With many of our communities, especially with the Black community, we have a long way to go." So I would like to ask you, as a Black police officer, do you feel as though, in recognizing that with your with other Black police officer colleagues, things are being put forward or suggested that other colleagues, other non-Black colleagues can do within the Black community? Are those things being put forward, and are they being taken into consideration? Is action being taken on the basis of maybe a collective of Black police officers that are making suggestions, and how well are those being implemented if the suggestions are being taken?
To be fair, I'm not at that level where those are to be implemented. And I heard his comments yesterday, and I thought those comments were very well thought through and very well projected. And I totally agree with what he's saying. But when you are other colleagues who are, shall we say, like us, and in order to get to the position in where they have achieved, I would say they would have got there a lot sooner had it not been for what I say, hurdles being put in their way. Yeah. Okay. However, that has not stopped them from achieving. Yeah. And again, I'm not making any excuses. I think we know what goes on. All right. And I think it all depends on, it's down to us as individuals to keep things in the public eye, yeah, or wherever you are, in the right way and in the right manner. But I'm only speaking from my person. That's the way I would deal with it, yeah. Yes, it is, and I think certain things that has grated me over the years, in order to implement these particular changes that is necessary. One of the things that was being said is that we have to lower the pass mark, or lower the quality of candidate. And if I can say, quite frankly, I will stick my two fingers up to that. You do not in any way need to lower your standards in order to get a particular group on a particular ladder. We all know that there are, and I can fill this room and the whole house, this 5-bedroom house that I'm in, with people with ability, right? And they don't look any different to us, right? And more. And you're trying to say you're having to lower the standards or the grading in order to get through. No.
Nonsense.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So yes, they are being implemented, but we have got to also remember, if we're looking at how this thing with COVID now, everything's a tick box exercise, if I can say, and once that has been accomplished, that's done, all right, and then they move on. All right, has it really been accomplished? In some areas, no, but at the same time, I'm giving it balance now. There are lots of individuals, say Black, Asian, or non-white, who have been, the assistance and the help and the encouragement has succeeded. All right. So there's a balance, but it will be remiss of me to then turn around and say it's it's all doom and gloom, which it is not.
I think to continue with the idea of sort of trying to put putting or highlighting a more positive spin on the actions of the police force and their ability and efficacy in managing us as a community, not us particularly, but just generally. Do you feel like there are any things you'd like to highlight that perhaps the general community or public aren't aware of that has been put in place that you feel like has worked particularly well? So any specific practices have been sort of spoken to Black officers about, or officers in general, that has been put into the community and worked really well with regards to engaging with communities that perhaps, like the Assistant Commissioner said, they haven't always had a great relationship with? Things that perhaps we as the public aren't aware that you feel like statistically have worked well?
Okay. 25 years in the police force. Then had so you had in your local community, you had a beat officer, all right? Then they changed that and made that to say a community unit that would have a group of individuals, officers who will know the community, understand what and there will be the port of call for any. So as an investigator, you want to know what's going on, you want to know who's involved, you want to know the dynamics and the feel before you go in and start messing up or disrupting any good work that's been done. You used to have that. Unfortunately, it's not like that anymore. All right? So the understanding of communities, what they used to do a lot is get the Black officers like myself, all right, to deal, to speak to not so much the community, but individuals, all right? And that's not, and as a way of support as well. But sometimes there are some parts of the community won't talk to anybody else but us. Yeah. Because, and I suppose that's a good thing, because it's, likewise, there's certain communities that we will go into and they won't talk to us purely because of, who we are. We're different to them, just by the eye. So we was like, but is that practice going on now? I don't think as much. I don't think as much where, you can. And here's an example. Some years ago, I don't know if you'll remember, that they mentioned that there was a riot in Lewisham. Okay, and this was after a Sweet 16 birthday party. Unfortunately, somebody got stabbed during the party. I was walking around the area, looking, for anybody who saw anything or heard anything, any witnesses. And a few of the doors that I knocked on and spoke to the occupants, one of the things they were crying out for is, well, where's the local police officer? There's nobody here anymore, okay? There's no one here who we were able to sit down with or invite them in to have a cup of tea to say, this is what's going on, yeah? And that's all the public really want. But unfortunately, because of circumstances right now, I suppose resources and everything else, they're nowhere to be seen. So the things that as police officers are able to tap into a particular community, I think it's diminishing, unfortunately. Me, I think that is a cool role in a community, yeah, for them to know you, you to know them, and that trust element, you see. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's helped.
I think it's a very honest answer. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's a positive spin that I guess may allow people to feel like, okay, this is happening that we weren't aware of. But I think it is a very honest answer with regards to actually things that perhaps were more positive previously that could be back going forward. I wonder if either, I mean, I know, so similarly, I guess at your stage, where things get to your stage, Ruth, at the court level, there's been, well, there was a request following obviously the death of Stephen Lawrence, and Jack Straw, I think in '97, asked that people took more of a considerate look at how they prosecuted based on racial bias, etc. Do you feel like, I know of course you weren't practicing back in '97, but do you feel as though sort of at your time now, prosecutors, yourself obviously included, take an extra cautious look at the way that they try cases when there are cases similar to that of Stephen Lawrence in their hands?
So, what's the last part of that?
So it was whether or not at so within the court system, whether or not barristers, judges, and I guess to some extent members of the jury, although they're slightly different because they're outside the profession, whether they now take an extra cautious look at any racial bias that they might have when they're tackling issues similar or cases similar to that of Stephen Lawrence's following his death and the inquiry into that. But I think obviously between yourself, obviously, a police officer on the front line, and obviously Ruth, who we have here as a barrister, I guess there's perspectives to see how that might have, how that might actually be a positive look at how things have progressed.
I think the positive thing out of that is disclosure. Does anybody know about disclosure? Right, you get the mitigating factors in any investigation that you are in charge of, and to the point where you're taking it to court. So you're having to disclose to the Crown Prosecution Service the strength of the case. Okay, but likewise, you're going to also have to disclose anything that may well undermine the case also. Now, if that involves racial biases or anything like that, that has to be, it's a must, no matter what it is. I haven't seen any case since the Stephen Lawrence, in any fact, that has, to be fair, that I've been involved in that involves any of that. I don't think anything that I've been involved in would involve any of
that. Just to clarify, so you're saying you don't think there's anything you've been involved in that has included any racial bias at all, or?
No.
So not necessarily you particularly, but you don't think you've come across anything at all, cases that have been tried or sort of things that happened on the ground that have included any racial bias at all?
I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say no. No. Do I hear a surprise gasp?
I think from myself. I'm going to pass it over. I'm going to give you a quick break, Patrick. I'm going to pass it over to Ruth, who's here as a barrister, who's a criminal barrister. So I guess maybe from her side of things, Ruth, have you felt that there's been progress since Stephen Lawrence with regards to tackling racial bias, and if so, how, and if not, why?
Okay, so I'm obviously coming from a more recent perspective. I'm aware of the report, the Macpherson report, about 21 years ago now, and I'm aware that it's made a number of recommendations. I can only sort of speak for certain levels of training or things that I'm aware of, but I would say, I'm assuming it's probably since those 20 years that there is racial bias training. So as Patrick has said, I think in terms of disclosure, it might not be necessarily that there's something that's of a racial bias. It's just broadly anything that could undermine the prosecution case or possibly assist the defense case. So any and everything relevant underneath those two headers should be disclosed to the defense, whereas previously maybe people may have held things back. What I would say, though, is that there have been a few scandalous cases more recently where, although we have that requirement, things were still held back. And that was a couple of well-known and well-reported rape cases in which the charges ended up being dropped because all along the defendant had said that there was certain material and certain communication between him and the complainant, alleged victim, and never got disclosed until a very late stage. And so was that as a result of racial bias, or was it as a result of incompetence, lack of resources? I don't know, but whatever it was, it shouldn't have been held back. And it eventually was. In terms of when you're dealing with the court system, obviously you have magistrates that deal in the magistrates court. They're lay people, they're your everyday people. They will have a certain level of training in terms of dealing with the cases, but they're not legally trained. Everyday people are our peers. That's the whole point of the justice system, is to be seen as being open and also having jury members, again, your peers. In terms of determinations, again, like I spoke at the start, I believe magistrates should have a level of maybe equality and diversity training and looking at innate prejudices and things to avoid. Jury members won't have had that level of training.
Well, I think slightly different perspectives there, but I guess coming from different areas of the film, I think both very valid. And I'd like to ask Anthony, I know that we sort of given you a break from the beginning. But I'd just like to ask, perhaps, do you have a similar view? I guess, Patrick and yourself, I don't know if do you work in the same area, same jurisdiction, or you?
I don't think there's a lot more to add it in that respect. I think everything really is actually hanging on disclosure and how it's done and how people handle themselves. Obviously, there have been instances where it's been alluded or made clear at the end or near to the end of prosecutions where things have been held back. It's pretty much the same, like, what's her name again, the barrister, what she was saying. I think I agree with her view. I'd go along with that.
Okay.
But I just add one more thing, sorry, it would be remiss of me if I didn't, coming from a legal standpoint. So there are tests. The police may charge, it then goes on to the CPS, who will make that charging decision, and they have a legal test. There's the public interest test and there's the threshold test. And so they look at the level of evidence. Is there a high likelihood that this person will be found guilty at the end of a trial based on the evidence that they have, based on, everything that they've looked at, and based also on, as Patrick mentioned, maybe the evidence that goes against their case. And they also look at the public interest. Recent public interest cases that maybe hold a stronger case for being prosecuted would include domestic violence cases, because we've seen the rise in the statistics. And so there's a number of legal considerations as well when you make the decision to then charge and carry forward a case.
Thank you. We have a question that's come in from, I believe, Facebook comments, which is out to everybody, but I guess Patrick and Anthony, you may wish to give your points of view. So somebody actually made a point. They said, I believe police officers should police areas in which their residence is close proximity. I know obviously that causes some issue with regards to, obviously, if you know the people, it may give a bias either in their favour or against them, if you obviously live next door to them or whatever. And of course, it may not be the safest for the police to go home after doing their job. So, I mean, what are your views on that? I guess the idea with that comment is that it would help to bring a genuine appreciation for the things that are happening in that community to the way in which you police the people. And it would allow the people, I guess, to feel closer to their police officers that they see whilst they're walking around the streets, because they know them as neighbours, etc. Do you think it's a positive suggestion to have police officers police in the areas that they currently live in, or no? And that goes to everyone, actually. I think anyone can answer that, but obviously Derek, Patrick and Anthony.
Yeah. Can we even start with John and going on to Adam, just to kind of get it from a community perspective, right? Would you guys be willing to see, police officers like, patrolling a bit more often, so you get a bit more familiar, you build that kind of relationship? I think the comment was alluding to. No.
So just to be clear, the comment was about having police officers that live in your area. So having
right, okay.
that are local to you, living local to you, and police.
Right. Okay. Right.
But yes, please, John, Adam, anyone, Patrick, Anthony, everyone else.
Personally, I wouldn't. This is a different. Right, London is a totally different, or parts of London is totally different to, say, Scotland or whatever. All right.
Yeah.
So and the
Patrick, I think we're having a little difficulty with your connection.
individuals are, I suppose,
I think we're having
different mindset. Oops, can you hear me now? Somebody else go, and I'll come back.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. So yeah, whilst Patrick's come back to us, does anyone have any other thoughts? I think he was suggesting that perhaps London is different to other parts of the country and sort of the nation.
From a risk factor perspective, the society has moved on in such a way where that's not really a feasible thing to do. I mean, you can see with all the different elements, you've got terrorism, you've got gangs, you've got all sorts of different criminal activities that sort of come into a melting pot. And the type of society we live in now, obviously with people with negative views, they have access to firearms, all these different things. It's not a good idea. It's potentially very contentious and could be quite dangerous as well for that individual. It probably is good in the sense, in terms of communication, building a relationship with the community, but then that person could live somewhere else and build the same kind of relationship with the community anyway.
I agree. I agree.
I agree too.
I agree.
I know it would probably never be a good idea for that to occur. No matter how we would like to see more police and what's not. Not like, especially in the times we live in now. Nah, that's totally not safe for police. Let me be very, very clear. That ain't safe for police at all.
Maybe we need to change that narrative. Maybe it's because of the times we live in now. We need to, I don't know, reinforce a certain kind of relationship between police and the community.
Man, nah, even so, brother. Even so, like,
what are we so afraid of? Be friends with the police, Adam.
Yeah, but confidentiality as well.
Invite them into the
confidentiality.
Man, true. The confidentiality point too. Like, at the end of the day, we all work. I presume all of us here work or have work. So you're gonna want to go home from work and be comfortable at some point. And if police gotta live in the same area they have to police, we going way past the 1700s now where it's all in one town. So
yeah,
like they want to go home and be away from work to sit down and relax, and nobody not knock down the door saying, "Listen, I know you are police. You were here. Come and give me some help." You know.
Before we come back to Patrick, I'm just going to ask Andrew. I think, Andrew, you had something you wanted to add?
No, with regards to what you're saying about police living next door to us or in our communities and maybe patrolling and things like that. I do see a positive comment that I can make. I mean, we do need examples to pass on to our, children. And maybe they can, be a good role model and do things in the community that, the young children can look to them, as it might not be what you want for your children, but, there's a lot of young boys that want to become police, or even little girls. And, good examples, that's what we need, So I have two different views, but I still think that having them around could give a good impact on that.
Right.
I think, Akil, I think in regards to that, if we want, I understand the whole concept of becoming familiar with your community. In a way that could happen, I don't know if it happened, I've got no idea, is having the same group of police that regular police this particular area. A relationship could easily still be built in that manner, but I don't agree that they should be living in the area. It's a whole big ballgame, as what we've just clearly explained and expressed. But
I agree with that. If anything, we should the police that police our area should be familiar to a point where sort of invoke what Akil was suggesting. Like they should be familiar, so yeah, Patrick, he's a police. He's police this area. But Patrick don't have to live in this area. You see what I'm saying? So
Right.
I think it should be known.
You should be feeling safe.
It's so that you feel,
You know that you've got police living next door.
Yeah, I actually have a police officer living across the street,
There you go.
Exactly.
but I
And
don't talk to him.
you wouldn't even know sometimes.
I don't know. He's over there. You know what I'm saying?
Police your area, right? Though, Akil?
Sorry?
He doesn't police in your area, though, no?
No, he's not actually.
So there you go.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, I guess. I mean, so a question that kind of popped in mind when we were discussing, about when John had this question about particular training for police officers in terms of how they deal with how they deal with the Black community. Do you think that it is down to training, or is it down to individual bias? Is there, put it plain and simple, let's be blunt about it, is it that there is racism that actually plays a role in these very, very abusive instances, interactions with the police that some people from the Black community has had? Or do you think that it's actually training where people do need to be taught or trained as to how to deal with people from the Black community? I mean, is the Black community so different from other communities, or is it that members of the police force just lack that kind of compassion or understanding, or actually function from a certain bias that they need to get rid of?
So every officer gets what's called diversity training. It doesn't matter who you are, or what background you're from. Everybody gets it. So they all get trained. What happens is that you can train somebody as much as you want to train them, but when that person actually goes out onto the street, they are then going to taint that with their own personality and their own actions on their own views of what's in front of them. And not only that as well, I remember I said to you, there are some people, they may have joined the organization for the wrong reasons. So they've joined to actually portray and practice that authoritative role. Like, oh, did you know why I stopped you? Go over there. Right. Now I'm going to do this or that. You've broken. And they have no personality in terms of how they're dealing with the individual or empathy. Then you've also got another set of individuals where, because you're policing somewhere and you're dealing with hardcore, because with this role, you could deal with the person who's sleeping on the street, who's homeless, dirty, mental health, whatever it is. You could then be dealing with somebody else who just works in the shop across the street, who gives you your tea in the morning. And then you could then start going up. You're dealing with the local councillor. You're dealing with judges. You're dealing with lawyers. You're dealing with officials. So you're dealing with a varied form of members of the community. The problem is that some people, because they're dealing with this family or an individual, like a whole family, every single member of that family has come out. They've always been burglars, drug dealers, or thieves. And that's literally what happens sometimes. You have actually whole families, that's all they're interested in. They do nothing else. So even if there's a young one, 10, going to school, you used to see him and he goes, "Hi, Mr. Policeman," everything. As soon as he hits that teen, 16, he's with the older brothers doing the very same thing. The dad's in prison. The mum's a prostitute. These are the sort of things we do. So sometimes there are officers who you are dealing with this sort of stuff consistently. You become hardened in your thinking, in your mind. So you lose that empathy. You have no empathy for anyone. Everybody that comes across, you are sarcastic. You have that, oh, well, he must be a criminal then because he looked away from me, or but he isn't. But because you're dealing in that environment so much, you become engrossed in it, and you then start to struggle to separate who you're dealing with. This is what I mean.
Yeah, right.
That's what happens to some people. That's why there are these bad interactions. It's the same thing. Sometimes you see these things that they come out on the news, how a nurse treated a 90-year-old woman badly or dealt with this patient in such a coarse, rough way, and they had this really, poor operation, and they were in so much pain. But that nurse, she showed no empathy, and she didn't care, because as far as she's concerned, that patient is just another number along her list of people to care for that day, and she will do the bare minimum, if it's what I mean. It's something that happens in across a variety of professions. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Anthony. Patrick, do you have anything you wanted to add, or?
No, as I said, it's the thing is, you're going to have individuals who have cemented their own thoughts, their preconceived ideas, are caught up within, I would say, a team's mentality. And it's easy, because then they fall in line. Okay. Yeah, they fall in line. But I can say, not, as I said, in the years I've been, yes, you do have individuals in that way. As Anthony was saying, yes, there are individuals who, yes, you're going to have ideas about, because that's their way of life. But at the same time, I've always, regardless of what their way of life is, me personally, just because the father or the brothers or someone else is, being doing a particular thing, it doesn't necessarily mean I have to treat them in a way that may be correct of my thinking, but you have to treat them with respect. And that's a code I always go by, regardless of who is in front of me, and regardless of what they're being arrested for, or even spoken to about, or even at the end of the day, even when they get convicted at court. There's not a personal notch. For me, I find it quite disappointing, believe it or not. And when I say disappointing, I feel it for them and the rest of the family. But I'm just putting my own personal spin, my own personal judgment on it. But I can totally agree with what Anthony is saying, because back in the day it was called canteen culture, wasn't it? Yeah. And to be part of that culture, sometimes you have to be. There are some individuals who feel that they have to be ingrained into it. Yeah.
Right. It seems as if what two of you guys are saying, and what I've heard time and time again anyway, is that the policies and even the guidelines and everything, they're in place, and they're proper, it sounds like, but it's just you have the individuals who then corrupt what the process should be. So then you wanted to say something, Patrick?
I'm just going to say that's in all organizations, isn't it?
Right. So should pressure for change come from higher, the governing bodies, or should it come from within, where people actually speak out against individuals? And I mean, feel free to omit the question if you will, but do you think that it should come from within, where people do speak up against individuals who are corrupting the organizations that really supposed to be, our protection, essentially?
I think I'd add that question, whether or not presumably it would be the right thing to do, but how comfortable do you think Black officers feel to be able to speak up within their organisation? So like you rightly said, it happens within all different organisations, but particularly within the police force, how comfortable do you feel that Black officers feel to be able to say to their superiors or whoever, I don't think this is right that my colleague X has done this with regards to the Black community or whatever?
It's a very broad question. If it's per se an incident that you're dealing with here and now, and you're present on scene, it's the onus is on you to take action and to stand up and do what you know is lawful, what is right, and what, you know, doesn't contradict that person's human right. If you don't do that, then you're the one who's going to be accountable. If there's this thing that we're taught even from the very beginning in training school also. You say, for example, you're dealing with an incident and a senior officer comes and goes, "Oh, him over there, go and arrest him." You must not arrest that person unless you can verify or ascertain that that person has committed or is committing an offense. If that person hasn't or isn't committing an offense, you have got no power to arrest that person. And that person, that officer, whether they be senior or whoever who has told you to do it, cannot force you to do it. Because if you then go ahead and you bring that person into the custody and they go through the justice system, and it's been found that you've made that arrest unlawful, you're the person who's going to bear the consequences, not the senior officer. Okay, there may be something said under the basis that you were placed under duress to do that, but essentially the responsibility boils down to you. So the responsibility is upon each individual officer to do what they know is right and to uphold the law, because that's what essentially you joined to be there for in the first place. What essentially is going to make change is, of course, which they've started. Like, for example, I joined in 2004. When I joined, I think my contingent was like 500. There wasn't really more than maybe about 10, 17 of us. And most of that it was a mixture of Indians anyway. There weren't many black. What I found was when I went through training school, a lot of the people who joined in terms of black officers, they didn't pass the exams. They failed the exams because it was so intense. We had so many rolling exams. I think we had 4 exams per week. The main one was done on a Friday and people just couldn't handle it. And the pass mark then, I don't even know what it was. I think then it was 70%. So if you got 69, you failed. And you were only allowed to fail, I think it was 3 exams back then. And a lot of black people, they failed. So that didn't help the situation. Now, I've noticed moving forward in our present climate as it is, there are a lot more black officers than they were. When I went to my station, I got posted, there was only something like 3 or 4 of us. And that station was a massive high security station. There was only 4 of us. Now there's a lot more people. So these are the things that's going to make change. There needs to be more black officers in senior ranks. Like, for example, you mentioned about the assistant commissioner. People need to be seeing more people who are black in that rank. That makes a difference. It gives kids role models, and it also influences the decision making and the direction that the force itself takes. So until these things actually materialize, it's highly unlikely you're going to see an excessively massive change from what it currently is.
Right. I just wanted to open that question because Amanda touched on a point in regards to speaking up against, speaking up when you see racism around you, when you see any kind of discrimination around you. Just to open it up to the rest of the panel, we can start with Angela. Do you guys feel comfortable within your workplaces to speak up against these things, or do you feel that kind of pressure of oh, it might not go the way I intended to, or you might be you might be you might have to live with the consequences of speaking up?
Yes, sometimes I do feel like I need to really search myself to see if I'm taking the situation in a negative way, or is this real what I'm seeing? And a lot of time I would have that conversation with my husband, and he would straight away say to me, "What are you saying to me? That's wrong. That is never supposed to happen." Mm-hmm. And that would kind of give me the confidence to, next time it happens, say something or, approach the situation. So it's not always the case where you feel very confident to, speak up for your rights in that sense, even though within yourself, that what's happening and what's being said, it's not right, within your race and, your culture maybe, but yeah, but sometimes I can't let it go. So even if it takes me days to get the confidence, I would just go and try and deal with it the best I can. But yeah.
All right. Alethea, what about you?
That's my
I'm very confident. It's just that I've never actually, lucky for me, where I work, I've never actually witnessed anyone being treated differently because of their race. On the contrary, it comes across as if they're a bit scared, to be honest, to even attempt to treat you differently, from my experience, because they don't want to be labeled as racist, being such a big organization. They don't want to be labeled as such, because the difference is with the RC, within nursing, you're usually joined to a union that will protect you and fight your corners. So I guess the trust is they're a little bit scared to be liable to be, have that label placed on them.
Okay.
From my experience, but I'm sure it's happened. It's just that I've never experienced or witnessed it.
Okay. Adam, how about yourself? I think you're on mute, Adam.
Yeah, I am on mute. I actually hearing my brothers, Patrick and Anthony, experiences, and it's quite saddening. Me personally, I experienced multiple cases of racism, and I always try to be objective, because a lot of times people act out of ignorance.
You think that, so just to touch on what you said, do you think that it was blatant or intentional racism, or was it something?
In my case,
yeah,
I've experienced both. So the blatant ones is the ones that you'd have to try your utmost best not to respond to aggressively. The ones out of ignorance, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, you don't know no better actually, so you brush it off or whatever the case. Not that it's right or you shouldn't address it, but sometimes you will escalate a situation and then nobody's better for it. So
you feel okay dealing with a situation like that.
Yeah. You did the way I try to confront it, I always confront it from an educational perspective.
Right.
Like, I will ask them, what are you actually trying to say? Like, what are you actually trying to say here?
Right.
That being said, I'm still not convinced. And what I would like is that I know there are good ones in the police force. I know there's good ones in the police force. We got two right here. I put my foot in my mouth. We got two right here. We got good ones. And not to say just the black ones, not just to say just black officers, because I've encountered countless white officers who been genuine, who been good.
That's true.
Sadly, however, I don't see the injustice getting dealt with from a legislation perspective. Like the police would say, come Adam, you just thief this. And I would say, no, not me. I don't care, I'm taking you in. You go, you get to court, and the magistrate or the judge or whoever will automatically assume the police say so the police have to be right. You know what I mean? That's the type of systemic labeling that I don't like. I gotta mix it up because I experienced that. Me.
Yeah. I'm probably not in extreme cases. Patrick has something like to comment, I guess.
Yeah, cool. I'm listening. I'm ready to listen.
Yeah, the thing is, everyone is going to have different experiences, all right? And I'm very careful, very, very careful not to just paint it it's a black issue. All right, because if and talking about individuals who, if it's comfortable for us to talk up about things that we feel are not right. I think, to be honest, the answer to that would be yes. It's there are those who are not comfortable, but they find their individuals who they are comfortable to speak to in relation to issues that they encounter. And again, I'm going to do a balance here. It's not just, it's not just a black issue, because, I have many a colleague of mine, and I'll say the years that I've been working in the departments I've been working in, they are fantastic. The individuals that I rub shoulders with are fantastic. All right. And I can't fault them in any way. But, other colleagues who are not black have issues, right? And at times they also feel it difficult to speak up. So I think we have to give credit, we have to do credit where, give credit where credit is due.
Right.
And, if it is blatant to where the race scenario is concerned, then yes. I think where I'm concerned, it's a
losing you again, Patrick.
Of maybe not go to a senior officer. Me again?
They're just losing you again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we can, yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that's telling me to cut out now anyway. Yeah, it's look, I think sometimes, in any argument, in any discussions that we're having, we need to have balance. And I think in a career that many of us are in, we know what it is. We can see it for what it is, but it's then how do we respond to it? As you were saying a little while ago, you come from an educational point of view, Adam, yeah? And it is at times, sometimes, we have to ask ourselves, is it our own sensitivities? Yes, we're going to get people who are going to be saying things that are not to our liking, all right? And that's a fact, okay? But how do we respond? How do we, is not everything that is being said is a race issue. Not, and I think we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
And deal with the matters in hand. And if it is, then deal with that matter in hand.
Right. Thank you. Jan, about yourself and experiences that you find it difficult to speak up against racism in your workplace?
So I don't really see any racism within my organization per se. Obviously it exists, but I think for me personally, if there's something that's there that I experience, I will speak up. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not gonna just stay silent and especially if it's bothering me, I am gonna speak up about it and bring it to whoever I can bring it to, for example, managers or whatever. But obviously most organizations, obviously on paper, they have that active inclusion, they have those department and organization to help you to deal with situations like that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, speaking up is like the best thing to do anyway. Even though sometimes, people might flag you to say, be careful of that one because, X, Y, Z and stuff like that. But I guess at the end of the day, if it's the right thing to do, that's what you have to do, right?
Yeah, definitely. And to Ruth, I just wanted you to kind of touch on because you've even touched on within your field of work, line of work, you've noticed kind of, different, you can say, disparities in terms of opportunities when it comes to certain race. But do you have any advice for people when they want to speak up or when there's an issue that they need to speak up on, the ways or a way that they should go about it? Should they be a part of a union? Should they contact someone in particular to speak up for them?
I guess it would depend on the organization. If it's an issue at their university, for example, they may have some student support. I would say have a mentor in life in general. Doesn't mean that they would necessarily be at your organization. In terms of your organization, in terms of maybe your office space, do you have a HR department? Do you have a complaints and management team and things like that? I would say at this stage, it's about challenging things. I like Angela's point about kind of just checking with somebody, or kind of in your mind, am I overreacting? Am I overreacting that something, or was it not? But at the end of the day, you will judge that for yourself and know what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. I guess different organizations have different routes in which to address it. And if you don't feel like having a face-to-face discussion, you may want to raise it through an email. If you don't feel like doing it directly, you may want to then have a mentor or a particular committee or a union or someone to kind of advocate for that on your behalf. I think sometimes we often kind of brush things under. Like, I think someone just gave examples of kind of the overt racism and also the less overt, or maybe the microaggressions. The kind of little subtleties that after a while do get on your nerves. And so again, if you know it's not right, then I would say you should find a way to speak out about it, because if people aren't challenged, then it will just continue to be deemed as an acceptable behaviour.
Ruth, can I ask, do you feel that within your profession it's comfortable for you to speak out if you perhaps feel that another side's barrister, for example, is acting with some kind of racial bias, or is the line of questioning has some racial overtones? Do you feel comfortable at any point during that process, or court process, to say, I don't know exactly how you'd voice it, but to say that you feel that there's some kind of racial overtone, saying you're not comfortable with it? Do you feel comfortable to do that during a case?
I can't say I've come across that, so I'm not sure. But I guess in terms of there's inappropriate lines of questioning anyway, so it would fall under an inappropriate line of questioning. So yeah, it would be challenged. I would challenge it.
I think pleasantly, it seems as though quite a few people haven't faced or don't seem to have, or feel like they've come across a lot of racism within their workplace. I think maybe it's important to recognise there's a slight difference maybe between overt racism and racial bias or some racial prejudices. Patrick, if you don't mind, I'd just like to ask you a quick question, because I know you mentioned particularly that you don't feel so you've come across any racial biases with regards to the way that anyone's been handled, or any cases that you've come across as a police officer during your time. And again, to go back to the comments recently made by the Assistant Commissioner, being that it's important for members of the force over here particularly to remember that people are not protesting George Floyd's death, but are protesting racism within the police force, I presume was the insinuation. So with, I'm guessing other officers such as yourself not believing that there is any racial bias, how do you think that they then address how they begin to acknowledge that people are protesting racism if they don't feel there's any racial bias at all within the police force?
I think it would be wrong of me to say that there aren't any racial biases. Okay. However, I think in terms of, if you're looking at the promotions, if you're looking at people, being favoured for certain positions, yes, I suppose there's a racial bias there, and people have to recognise that. And I think the figures speak for themselves. Yeah, in terms of, if you're looking at the disproportionate levels of young black males being stopped, okay, young black males being arrested, and going through the justice system, it is disproportionate.
Do you think that's due to their action? If there's no racial bias, you believe that's due to their actions as opposed to any kind of overt of the black community?
No, I think our community, our community has a lot to
We may be losing Patrick there.
Yeah.
To learn. Okay. Losing me again?
No, you're back now. You're back.
We missed what was in between. Can you repeat that, please?
Sorry?
We missed a little bit. I believe you were saying something along the lines of the Black community having a lot to learn.
I think with Black community having a lot to learn in that, look, sometimes the opportunities that we are not offered is not so, you know, when I say, okay, when I'm dealing with our young Black males and the young Black females, my approach is, look, education. There is, you know, with everything else, we have choices. There's ways that we ought to conduct ourselves, not to give individuals the opportunity to even come to our doorstep, or even, you know, if they're going to speak to us, it's like, okay, yeah, just take your time and be calm, and if they're not treating you with that respect, then, you know, try to I suppose calm things down by the way in which you react. It's a difficult one. It is a difficult one. And I suppose that, for me, you know, I suppose it's just the way I carry myself. And I think that goes a long way in, I can say that it may well be over if I'm dealing with it on a personal level. They're not going to come to me personally and tell me to my face or say anything around me that will be overtly racist. Yeah. And I'm not saying, you know, I can, but have I lost my way in what I was just saying? I think I have.
No. I think it's clear. I think the general idea being that how you conduct yourself, you personally feel, will then lead to how somebody else conducts themselves. I think there's perhaps more to delve into there, and some people may disagree with regards to the idea of there being no racial prejudice or racial bias. Some people might agree on that part. I know that Anthony mentioned earlier that sometimes there's fatigue in terms of having to deal with the same issue over and over again, and so police act in perhaps a slightly irritated way from the outset because they are, you know, I guess, bored with the same scenario happening over and over again, and perhaps there's something that could be done there to tackle that issue and how that then affects the people that are being encountering the situation with the police. But I think that the point was clear with regards to just how you conduct yourself when in action.
But again, even for our you know, with these young, you know, our own Black community, and one thing we've got to be clear about is not necessarily just because a policeman come up to you because they're racist. Just because a policeman come up to you is not because they are racially profiling. It could be a reason. There are many times I'll be walking, you know, back in, you know, years ago, even now, because your antenna goes up and all of a sudden you're thinking, well, that what I'm looking at now does not look right. Yeah, what they are doing doesn't look right. And I suppose being a Black officer, I'm not just looking for a Black person, I'm looking for all. Yeah. But I do know there are those who only see, you know, possible a color, and that's what they're up to. And that is a fact. That is a fact.
And that's, like you said, the conduct of the person is down to the individual, and what the officer sees is down to the individual. I think that's a great point. And we're going to draw to a close. I think we've run slightly over time, but I think it was a really great discussion. Ruth, I will come to you. I think that the closing question, and Ruth, feel free to kick off. It might lead into what you're about to say. Are there any positive experiences that people want to share with regards to their interaction with the police? I think we've had quite a heavy discussion around things that need to change, and I think that rightfully there are things that do need to change, but any positive interactions that people want to share to like lighter note, or any positive interactions with the community that people particularly want to share, particular instances. Ruth, I'm going to ask you first because you did have your hand up in case there's something else you'd like to add there.
Yeah, so I'll try and answer both quickly. Off the back of Patrick's point, in terms of everybody having a responsibility, I agree. Yes, not everything is racism. But I do agree it's still a very real problem. It just might not be as overt. It might not be someone calling you a particular name to your face. But there are certain things and certain hurdles that are still there, and it can also fall into people's demographics and your social background. And so, for example, coming to the bar is a very expensive career to pursue, and so we know people from certain backgrounds, people who are coming from working class families, which happen to be a lot of Black people, do not necessarily have the means to even achieve that. And so, in terms of different examples that many of us have given of experiencing maybe racial profiling, maybe how someone looks at you when you enter a store, maybe in terms of the opportunities and the promotions that you're giving your jobs, they do still exist. We can't ignore that fact. In terms of factual evidence, you can check out the Lammy report. You can check out the Macpherson report. You can check out a report by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. The latest one, I believe, was 2018, and it's called Is Britain Fairer? And that looks again at not only just race, but also about the demographics, the social backgrounds of people in various different sectors. So education, the criminal justice system, and things like that. So it is still a very real problem. We personally might not have experienced based on certain questions that have been asked tonight, but we're all aware it still exists. With regards to people, everybody has their own individual responsibility. I think there is a big breakdown in the community and the police in terms of their relationship. It's not something we are oblivious to. Everybody is responsible for their own behavior. And what I would say, and again, even myself in my career, I think we expect a higher level of professionalism and expectations of people in positions of power or trust. And so whilst we are human and you may snap or you become desensitized, you have to self-reflect and check yourself and check your colleagues if you are not behaving in the way you should be especially in a public-facing role. There's good and bad in every single career and every single profession. And in terms of the negative experience we've spoken about, there are positive experiences as well. Just as we raised that some people may not feel comfortable raising grievances in their workplaces, I guess it may be the same that some people wouldn't feel comfortable in speaking to the police. It's a very real thing in certain communities that they wouldn't trust the police. However, were you to run into trouble, many of them may call some still wouldn't call the police. But I guess many people would call the police because that's who you would expect to call if you are maybe being assaulted or subject to something bad happening to you. In terms of positive experiences, I can't say I've had too many in terms of public as a civilian, but what I would say is that in my experiences at court, I think some police officers have been too nice to me as a defense barrister, and I don't want it to seem that because you're kind of my client's over there watching, and you're talking to me a bit too much, Mr. Officer. However, there have been experiences on the other side where maybe the officer, I feel that they are just a bit too invested into my client in a particular case. So I have had positive experiences as a barrister, and again as a civilian, maybe something's happened on my road. Something not so great happened in an area I used to live in a couple of years ago, where a young man was killed in the park that I would walk through, and I was actually trying to walk through to get to work New Year's Day. I had to go to court on New Year's Day, and I couldn't get through because it was all taped off. And so I went to the officers and just said, what's happening? And they were very, very honest and open and polite to me. And so there may be instances when you may just have a general interaction with the police where you can ask them questions and they may be, very personable and very down to earth with you.
Anybody else wanting to share?
I was offered a lift. I was offered a lift from a police officer.
Can I just say, I have to leave now.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick, so much.
To leave, okay?
We really appreciated your points and your time taken. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Thank you all.
Take care, brother.
Thank you.
All right. Adios.
Thank you. God bless.
Ciao.
Alethea, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there was an instance where I was at a particular area and there was a dispute happening, and the police officer, he overheard that I needed to get to my station. So he was asking, where's your station? What time's your train? And so forth. And he actually gave me a lift to the exact station because he passed the other station so I could get the train at that particular time. And he was even looking on his phone to check the train time. So I've had good experience with them.
Didn't even turn the blue lights on.
Should have, right? You should have.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up, any other points? Anthony, I know obviously you are a police officer, so just any sort of particular points of positive interaction with the community that maybe you'd like to share as well before we come to a close?
And even just to add on to what Amanda is asking you, can you just probably make one suggestion, what you think the church has, if they have any kind of responsibility or what they can do in terms of this situation, these issues, how can we move forward a bit like faster, even closer to change rather?
Build a relationship with our local police officers.
What I used to do is, because I deal specifically in what they call neighborhood policing, a bit like what Patrick was mentioning. I think the old setting was beat officer role. So I used to, a few years ago, I used to like, I'd go into the youth clubs and stuff like that, introduce myself and get to know the kids, get to know them by name, encourage them, speak to them. I got I used to apply for funding from the lottery and local government and stuff like that, and we used to run tournaments. We used to run PlayStation, table tennis. We formed a five-a-side football training course that used to run literally every week. So we ran that for a few years, and I found out these things, it helped. Because not before that, the parents or the kids, they would just see us and like, no, I'm not talking to you. Or then people started to engage and they would have a conversation. Then some people who may have a problem may start coming to you and they would tell you, or, you know, my husband beats me, or, you know, little things that proved to break the barrier down, and it helped a lot. What I did was in the last throes of it was I did this what was that, like an open day, so a careers day. So I had the army, the police, people from apprenticeship schemes and all that sort of stuff. Loads of different people come down just to open their eyes and make them aware of what the career opportunities are. So I've done loads of engagement like that, and it's helped. I don't know who is doing that sort of stuff now, because I've left all of that. But that was a very positive thing to see how people changed in terms of, at first they were hostile, very standoffish, and then we were able to actually have communications where you're walking in the street and somebody say, "Oh, hello, Tony," or actually address you, where before they wouldn't. Or some of it's so funny, like some people, like they start saying hello to you, but if they're with their mates who are like, doing whatever, they won't say hello. They'll give you the eye and they look at you and they go. But if they're on their own, they'll go, "Hi, Tony, how are you doing?" Because they wouldn't want people to see them talking to the police. Do you know what I mean? So it's stuff like that. In terms of what the church can do, it's a matter of communication, speaking to, I guess, what we need is probably to start with it's always, because the future is important, isn't it? So the church needs to engage with the younger members, the young kids, these young ones, and explain to them about, how they carry themselves out there. Maybe try and put on engagement schemes where they invite like the local neighborhood or whoever the officers are, and do like a fun day or something like that to try and appease and break down and build bridges, build relationships. And that's what's going to help to change people's mindset, because it's very difficult when you don't know somebody, don't know their name, you've had no interaction with them other than in their role of authority. When you bring them out of that environment into something that's totally different from their usual role, you can actually get to know the person and get a better understanding. And that would be a better thing for the young people to actually see that, okay, not every police officer or not everything about policing is that bad. That's my suggestion, really.
Thank you. And I think that's important. I'm going to ask Adam, but before I ask Adam just to say his piece, I just want to make clear, I think it's important to have these positive points, especially as we're closing now, not because, it's nice to just be nice and just say, oh, well, this is a great thing, this is a positive thing, let's all pretend like there aren't bad things happening. I think it's important to have these things because it's important to think as a church and as individuals, what can we do so that our young children aren't fearful all the time? I think there's a lot in the media that makes especially young Black boys, fearful of the police or just generally of being outside or being able to protest, etc. And I think that's not healthy and it's not helpful. And I think if we can start to look at things that are positive that can be done, it helps to take away that unnecessary level of trauma. Because there's a lot more out there that they do really have to be aware of. So if we can try and add a positive spin to help them not have to deal with so many heavy things at a young age, it's great. Can I ask Adam, you had a point that you wanted to share?
Yeah, in light of positivity, because I talk a lot about the injustice, especially from a personal perspective. I think we have to remove the wall that creates a us and them. I think the church has a very, very strong part to play in removing that wall, in showing young people in particular, like Tony said, that there are police officers among us in the brethren, there are police officers among us in the community. Akil says he has a policeman for a neighbor, but somehow society has built us up to believe that it's a us and them. So a police is never seen like a nurse, like Alethea, like a nurse. You know what I mean? There's that stigma too. So you're fearful to approach. Also, especially in this country, since I lived here, the response or the reaction I've seen police given when, and John could probably attest to this, whenever the Pathfinders and Adventurers, for example, go on a march. If you're talking about church, when the drum corps playing, it almost, especially white officers, used to say, like, we are actually impressed that Black young people actually do something positive. So somehow we can create that bridge, that link, so that the Met would know that, listen, there's a opportunity here to show other persons in the community and not just Blacks that there's a possibility of showing positivity, a positive line, that police are not the enemy. Corruption is, for argument's sake, or people abusing the power is, and that there's an option for young people to be able to strive to be even a police officer if you want to be. You shouldn't be afraid to be that. So that's where I would want to end on that.
Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Can we say a closing prayer? Alethea, will you please pray for us?
Sure. May we close our eyes? Precious Redeemer and Holy Father, we just want to give you thanks for gathering us here to have such an enlightening conversation. I pray, oh God, that as we go forward with the information that we've just shared amongst us, each other, I pray, oh God, that also our viewers and ourselves will take these positive information and apply them, and also get rid of all the negative connotation and the negative thoughts that we had harbored in our hearts previously, but move forward in harmony and in love and in kindness. I pray, God, that you'll cover each and every one of us, also our viewers, with your blessing, oh Lord, and take us forward in good health so we may bless others as we carry on. And I give thee thanks and praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Amen.
Just to remind you guys of Friday Night Live happening tomorrow. The topic will be colorism and Black women. So we've been hearing from our Black women about their experiences with colorism within the workplace, just within society, and how they would like Black men to speak up for them. So all of the men, I need you to turn up. I need to turn up and listen to these beautiful queens. That's going to be joining. You know what I'm saying? All the Black queens, Wakanda. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Blessed.
Thank you all for joining, and thank you everybody who's watching online.
Yeah, man. Take care.
Thank you for having us. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming as well.
Let me give my royal